Okay, so if you're really self-aware, but you're also still stuck and still struggling, then this video is for you. And if you're anything like me, back then, I knew everything about my patterns. I knew everything about my psyche and my limiting beliefs and trauma and whatnot. And yet I just wasn't really getting anywhere. And I kept consuming a lot of content online and on YouTube, and I read all the books. Eventually, though, I realized, I think this is all just performative engagement. And we might not realize it at the time because we're like, but, I'm learning about all these things. I'm becoming more and more aware of all of my patterns and who I am and my issues. But really, it can be an emotional bypass in disguise. It can be bypassing the actual inner work that's required for actually true transformation. And so intellectual understanding can steer us away from the felt work of healing, right? Being up here does not actually equal feeling the thing. And so what we call hypercognitive activity is one of the ego's cleverest tricks. Gosh, it's so clever. And there's a reason for it. And we're going to talk about it. But let's say, you're struggling and the ego's instinct is to analyze and seek solutions, but this can actually reinforce avoidance of the underlying emotional root. And so thinking and intellectualizing our emotions does not equal actually feeling them, right? You can journal about your emotions, you can talk about your emotions, but that does not equal actually feeling them. And so it's almost like this false completion loop, right? Where the brain believes it has processed trauma, but the emotional charge remains in the body. Quite interesting. I find it so fascinating just how smart our psyche is. Now, why does all this happen? Why are we so self-aware and yet so stuck? Well, cognitive awareness is not physiological completion from a somatic trauma perspective. You can know that you have a fight or flight or freeze response, but if your body hasn't actually discharged the stored activation, then your system will keep reacting the same way. And then if you have incomplete stress cycles running in your system from the past, can be from your childhood, can be from, any other past traumas later in life, but without titrated sort of felt sense experiences of safety and of resolution, the nervous system stays braced and constricted for danger, right? And so thoughts alone cannot convince your body and your nervous system otherwise. It's just not possible, right? You can tell yourself when you're anxious, you can be like, just stop being anxious. Does that help? It's never helped me. And so the other thing is that you can be aware as an adult that a pattern is outdated, but those patterns, they were wired in often very early relational contexts where they actually worked and they were necessary. And so there's two types or two levels of knowing. There's the explicit mind, right? And the explicit mind is self-aware. It's your adult self. It knows the pattern that is unhelpful. But then there's implicit memory, your implicit mind, right? It's your emotional brain. And that is running on older survival-driven learning that still feels this pattern is absolutely necessary. And so just your awareness doesn't actually override that coding, that programming. And so what looks like being stuck or what looks like self-sabotage or resistance is really loyalty to an unconscious mandate, right? So it's almost like, well, we can't actually relax and not be anxious because bad things might happen when we do. And if this is still running in your system, then of course you can't relax. And so there's still this necessity to staying stuck in your system. You're self-aware but stuck because the symptom is perfectly logical given the hidden emotional learning. This is really important to understand because until the felt necessity of that emotional learning that was necessary a long time ago is actually illuminated and integrated, the system keeps protecting you the only way it knows how, by staying stuck. right? So for example, if you struggle with anxiety in relationships, then maybe there's this emotional learning beneath it. If I stay anxious and hypervigilant, I can prevent abandonment. And this is a really important life-saving emotional learning. And it would be super silly to stop the anxiety from the perspective of that part of your nervous system. Now, when we look at all of this from an IFS perspective, from a parts work perspective, right, internal family systems, then really there's a couple of parts that are in conflict. So you might have a self-aware part that's all in for growth, but then you have your exiles and your protectors that are still convinced that change equals danger. And so then you also have the manager parts that are running the show, your hyper-analytic parts that keep working on yourself indefinitely, so you never have to feel the pain that the exiles, that those younger parts in you carry. Now, this video isn't meant to shame you, on the contrary, because shame never works. I've been there myself. I've been exactly where you are right now if you're watching this video, self-aware but stuck. And it's a classic, really, and I see it a lot. I also see it a lot in my clients. Now, what is the solution? Well, number one, we have to build regulation capacity, because without a baseline of safety, any attempt to change will trigger the survival alarm, and then nothing changes. Now, number two is that you need to get to know the parts that need you to stay stuck so they can keep protecting you. So it's really about getting curious about these parts and asking them like, hey, what's your job? What are you protecting me from? And what would happen if you stop doing it? Also interesting could be, what younger part of me are you protecting? What is that exile underneath? And what are you protecting me from feeling? What is that old wound? What is the emotion that you're actually trying not to feel by intellectualizing everything, by watching another video, reading another book, all the things, right? Number three is change happens not when we understand better, but when the nervous system sees in real time that its survival logic is no longer true. And this requires often really a lot of deep inner work and a lot of feeling, which brings me to number four. You really have to learn how to feel your emotions. This is one of the essential skills, I want to call it. It's like human 101, right? The foundation of being human, something that so many of us never learned, or we unlearned it early in our lives. But we need to really get very intimate with our emotions, no matter how uncomfortable they are. We need to welcome them all in. We need to embrace them and allow them to flow through us. And I made another video here on my channel that goes into the process of how to actually feel your emotions. So go and check that out. Now, my next point is, and you might not want to hear this one, but I highly encourage you to consume less content. Yes, possibly also less of my content, and just generally consume less information, less reading about your issues, less psychology content, and just spend less time on your phone. This is a big one. And instead, focus on activities that connect you to life and to yourself. Go out in nature, go on walks, maybe, pick up an instrument, maybe, pick up drawing, hang out with friends, like just actually experience life out there, connect to other people, connect to yourself away from your phone and from displays. Super important and very underrated. And then lastly, work with a coach or a therapist regularly, at best once a week, especially for the first few months, maybe even for the first year or so. Really ongoing, regular inner work is essential. And we can't really do that just with YouTube videos or books or courses, because also true self-awareness requires input from a loving other. Maybe even a loving critic, right? Someone who can offer honest and external perspectives on your behavior, on your patterns. And I would like to tell you that you can do all this work on your own and be, a self-healer But I also truly believe that we need someone else to help us integrate these wounded parts. We need someone else to co-regulate with us, especially in our modern times where we lack a lot of the social connection that we might have had, a long time ago when humans lived in tribes. There's a lot of inner healing that we can do on our own, but I truly believe that there comes a point where it's actually necessary and just very helpful to work with a therapist or a coach. Now, if you want to learn how to actually drop from up here into your body, then check out my Breathwork and Nervous System Foundations course. It'll teach you everything you need to know on how to use the breath to heal your nervous system and get started on true somatic inner healing work. And I will leave a link below the video so you can go and check it out. All right, I'll see you soon. Bye.